I'm very pleased to say that Joan Salter, MBE, Holocaust survivor who confronted Suella Braverman over her use of language early in the year, joins me now. Hello, Joan.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. What's been your reaction to concerns that Gary Lineker invoked a parallel with the language used in 1930s Germany, Joan?
Well, unfortunately, I'm sure you don't have time for me to go through all the evidence. However, the big question is, when does rhetoric overflow into actions? And the truth is that when Germany started their actions against the Polish Jews in October 1938, they deported them as stateless across the border into Poland. And they were left there in no man's land. And I have read all the FCO documents and Hansard at the time. Jewish MPs of the time did not complain because there was a long-standing attitude within the Anglo-Jewish establishment and the British government that there were two types of Jews. The German and Austrian Jews, who were all cultured, and the Polish Jews, who were less important. And when the Polish Jews were left in limbo land, and the only MP who brought it up in Parliament was Colonel Wedgwood, who argued against it, and the Foreign Secretary for the Commonwealth Office kicked it into the long grass.
What does this tell you, though, Joan? What does this tell you about the parallel that Gary Lineker is accused of drawing? And we have heard Yvette Cooper from the Labour Party condemn it, that phrase, 1930s Germany. We have heard Tory politicians condemn the use of the phrase 1930s Germany. They say Gary Lineker should never have used that to condemn the language used by Suella Braverman. Are they right?
No, they're not right. They don't know what they're talking about. And I can give them facts. When the 1905 immigration bill was passed, many Jewish MPs at the time voted for it. And in fact, it was Winston Churchill who argued about the dangers of the bill. So no, I'm sorry. It seems at the moment anyone who's cleaning lady knew somebody who died in a concentration camp feels they've got the right to talk about it. And I know it's a very sensitive issue, particularly amongst Anglo-Jewish institutions. But the reality was there was always two types of Jewish refugee. There was the German and Austrian ones, and there was the Polish ones.
So I did have, Joan, a British Jewish caller yesterday who said, look, why did Gary Lineker talk about 1930s Germany? It was disrespectful, and it was triggering, she said, to many members of the Jewish community in this country. And she said he was absolutely wrong to do that. And then she said it would have been okay if he'd referenced language that was being used in 1930s Britain. Did she have a point?
Possibly. But I still say that Germany's intention in the 1930s was not extermination, it was deportation. And that flowed over into actions in October 1938 before kinder transport. In this country, kinder transport is set up as how good Britain was to bring in refugees. I, as a Polish Jewish child, although I was born in Belgium, but we were stateless. We were not Polish. Sorry, I was not Belgian. I was Polish. So it was in Vichy, France, that the Polish Jews were tackled. And in July 1942, the Polish women and children were rounded up. I was lucky in that a French policeman stood up against the rules and warned us, and we were smuggled out into Vichy. So I'm sorry, there are direct. And if people are very oversensitive, just like in the 1930s in this country, Anglo Jewry were very worried by bringing up this topic, it was going to cause anti-Semitism. And at the time, of course, there was Palestine issue and everything like that. Now, when the children in France were rounded up and taken to the Drancy concentration camp, actually, the Vichy government offered safe passage to any country who would take these children in, and Britain refused. And I can show documentation to prove this.
Understood.
So if people feel it's not true, challenge me and be willing to have a proper debate about it, not these sort of throwaway lines about Gary Lineker and whatnot.
Understood.
And if at that time people in this country has stood up and been willing to be counted, perhaps the extermination camps would have never been set up. It was because the world would not take the Jews. And initially, they had a Madagascar plan, which I doubt that any of the people phoning you up have even heard of. And in 1940, Germany began deporting German Jews into Vichy, France, with the intention of deporting them to Madagascar. So if anybody tells me that what the bill is telling us, and they're willing to deport children without any processing of whether they've got rights or wrong, and send them, I don't know, because they'll be stateless.
Understood.
So
you're saying there are direct parallels.
Absolutely.
Joan Salter, and you're also saying, Joan Salter, that language matters. Joan Salter, MBE, Holocaust survivor, who confronted Suella Braverman over her language and the use of invasion and people pouring into the channel earlier this year. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. You heard Joan Salter there saying language matters, defending Gary Lineker's use of the phrase 1930s Germany.